We had another kind of a situation involving the South Koreans. They were engaged in a pretty heavy firefight with some VC in an area not too far from this area some weeks later. And I was asked to come in close. They were going to send a U-Buddha, a junk, out to my boat. I was going to pick up a Korean colonel who was severely wounded. And it was too much firefight, you know, too much stuff going on to get a dust-off chopper anywhere near there. So I was going to pick him up and break for the clear and get a dust-off in for my boat. And we were patrolling back and forth, waiting on the U-Buddha to come out. You could see the tracer going back and forth and everything. And all of a sudden, a big explosion happened, and an explosion, a big puff of water. So I called the liaison officer with the Koreans and said, you know, be advised, you know, this is us out here. I don't remember my exact words. His response was only small arms, this location. So I turned to my driver, I was on the stern of the boat, and said, get out of here, and we did. I got to the pilot house, and as I did, they started dropping rounds pretty much in our wake as we got up. That first round was by the bow, the whole boat went up. So we were probably at the most 1 foot from having a serious incident. That was kind of exciting. And then during TET, that whole area was very volatile. During TET, we were there and we were helping some special forces guys, and they were close to being overrun, so we were dropping VT mortar rounds almost on top of their compound to hold the VC at bay. And it did. We later met those fellows. They were very appreciative. They were, in fact, one of them gave me said, we can't give you any food, you guys eat better than we do, is there anything I can give you? And he offered me, and I kept it and used it the whole time, a Thompson submachine gun. It was a World War II vintage. And one of the boats on ships out on patrol and running the barrier gave me a couple of clips. They had one clip, and so I used that. But that was an interesting time. Interestingly, also, I was kind of put on report by the security guys that would monitor our communications, because we were in this pretty hot situation, and I was passing information in the clear with coordinates of where it was going, what was happening, what they were telling the BC were doing, and I was admonished for not using what we call a shackle code. It's a 3-letter code that you're supposed to use, perishable for 24 hours, but that was crazy. I didn't have time to do that. But those were the kinds of little vignettes that occurred. And I guess one of the more gratifying things about the whole experience, I got home to my wife and son, mother and father on Christmas Eve. And it was quite a homecoming. My flight had been delayed 14 hours, so everything was, all the reservations that we had were all screwed up, and it's Christmas time. And I'll always remember my mother's voice. I hadn't heard her or my dad, so I had R&R with my wife, but I was in Chicago and telling them I was trying to get from Chicago to Atlanta. My mother got on the phone and said something like, "Hi, honey," and it almost brought me to tears. You know, it was amazing. But that was quite a homecoming. My next assignment after Vietnam was University of Rochester. I was in the ROTC detachment, and I was given the duty of Casualty Assistance Calls Officer for Monroe County, New York. Fortunately, our skipper let me have other lieutenants share that responsibility, but we were the guys that would go to the house, knock on the door, and tell the wife or the family that, you know, either critically serious ill and seriously wounded, or dead, or missing, or whatever. And those occasions were never good. I was given a pub to read about, you know, you're going to be between the Department of the Navy and the family, so that's your role. And I didn't do that role very well. I used to cry with the families and all that, but I conducted the military funerals and got very close to some of the families through this experience. And but it was strange, when I got to Vietnam, there were over 500,000 of us over there, and the first thought that occurred to me, why does it take 500,000 people to keep a friendly government in power. I mean, it just, of course, as it proved out, when we did pull out, as evidenced in John O'Neill's book, Unfit for Command, what the slaughter that took place. And tragically, many who had worked with us, to their detriment. It was a horrible experience. I was assigned to the University of Rochester in the ROTC program, and I was going to get out. I always wanted to go to law school. And we had a commanding officer there, Cliff Largess, who was a tremendous guy. He was an aviator, and we were embroiled in all this campus turmoil that was going on. But we survived very well because he was a very good leader. The SDS was supposed to take over our building one day, and he called me at home, and he said, "Bill, on your way in, get a couple of dozen donuts. I'll pay you when you get here." And so when the SDS came marching in with their banners and all that, we met them with coffee and donuts. The place was open, and they kind of hung around for about 20 minutes and left. And the captain met him on the steps. He said, "If you people are really against death and destruction, you're against the American automobile." And but he was that kind of leader. But he told me, I found out about this excess leave law program where you would go to law school for 3 years, pay your way through, but stay on active duty for purposes of retirement and the benefits. And so when I found out about that, I applied, and I was turned down. And the captain, I told him, of course, about it because he hadn't endorsed it. He said, "Look, that's a detailless decision. It's a four-person unit, four-man unit. And one of the guys was already selected for the program. So if I went, it was going to cut the unit in half." And he encouraged me to reapply. And I talked with my wife, and I reapplied, and I was accepted. And I, pulled back my papers for retirement. And I only applied to one school, University of South Carolina, from there, and graduated from law school, and then did criminal work for about 5 years. And one of my assignments that I really enjoyed was in Norfolk, the Command and Naval Surface Force Atlantic. We had 156 ships. And I would work every Saturday to talk with the executive officers on the various ships about legal problems because they were busy during the week, and I knew that. I did that, and then I went into the master's program at George Washington University and studied comparative and international law. And after getting that degree, I went to the Pentagon, and I actually spent 12 years of my career in the Pentagon. I worked in the Office of Secretary of Defense, and was on the U.S. delegation to the UN Conference on the Law of the Sea. We met in Geneva at the UN in New York, and I did an awful lot of international travel with that. And then it came time, I was in zone for a flag and was selected, much to my amazement. And many of those who knew me, know me. And then I served as the assistant JAG, and then took over command of what is now NCIS, and that was a very challenging assignment. We did a lot of intelligence work, had an anti-terrorist alert center. We did a lot of work with the CIA and others overseas, Manila and places like that. And then I got my second star and served as deputy JAG, and then we had this thing called tail hook, and I was the survivor of that. They got the guy below me, the admiral below me, and the admiral above went home on time, but there was only one admiral in the JAG Corps, where there'd only been 3, and that was me. So I was the acting JAG, the deputy JAG, and the assistant JAG. Well, we had some captains that were doing a marvelous job filling all that. And I stayed in that situation for a year. And I remember at my retirement, Admiral Stan Arthur, who was the vice chief, was the speaker, and one line that he said, he gave me a beautiful, and he wrote it himself, gave me a beautiful send-off. But one line I'll never forget, he looked at my wife and at my mother and my 2 sons and said, "You can have him back now."